Hey everyone, David C. Anderson here coming at you from the Knife Center, and today we're taking a look at some of the best survival knives that you can buy across a range of different price points. Let's check them out. So when we talk about survival knives, the question that always comes up is, do you go with a fixed blade or a folder? Now for me, I would always recommend a solid fixed blade, but I do understand that for some of you out there, that's not going to be an option, whether that's because of local or campground regulations or just your personal comfort level. With that in mind, I will have a couple of folders that I'll show you. Just know that if you ever are in a true survival situation, I definitely want the reliability of a fixed blade on my belt. They're simpler to operate in a stressful situation, and they've got no moving parts, so the risk of failure is a lot smaller. But the most important thing is to have a knife, any kind of knife, so the easier it is to carry, the more likely you'll actually have it on you when you need it. That ethos is going to guide my fixed blade recommendations as well. Ease of carry is definitely important, so I'm going to be showing you things with blades in the 4 to 7 inch range. Now the things I lay out here, of course, are not gospel, because what I think of as a survival knife could be very different from your opinions, but I think these are a good set of guidelines to build from. So I'm going to start on the budget side of things with Cold Steel and their new SRKC, which of course stands for Survival Rescue Knife Compact. And this knife has most of what I want to see in a survival knife, all available for under $50 right now. It's a good overall size with a 5-inch blade coming in at about 1/8 of an inch thick. This is a good compromise between being easy to control and large enough to do some bigger jobs. And as far as the thickness goes, that 1/8 inch size is about as thin as I'd want to get, because you definitely want to go for something with solid build quality. If you want even more length, this blade does come in a 6-inch version with their original full-size SRK. In the interest of sturdiness, I'd go with a full tang construction on your knife, and this knife has that, completely enveloped with Crayex, which is essentially a rubber material. It gives you a lot of traction, and in cold environments, it keeps your hands off the cold steel, get it? And it also has a prominent finger guard right here at the front. This is designed to help keep your hand from sliding forward onto the edge of the knife. Because honestly, the last thing you want if you're already fighting fatigue or frostbite, or when you're running on adrenaline, is to lose the use of one of your fingers. Now the blade itself is a fairly simple shape, and that's pretty important because you want your survival knife to be a knife first and a survival knife second. It needs to be actually useful for normal camp or utility stuff, or else you're not going to want to carry it, which really defeats the purpose. For the types of blade shapes I think you should stick to, a simple drop point or the straight clip point profile like this SRK are best. They're versatile for most tasks, they allow you to use it for skinning and provide a sharp point for piercing without being too thin or weak. I'd probably stay away from clip point blades with a real aggressive scoop, but a straight clip like this is just fine. Now the steel on this blade is SK5 carbon steel, and of course that raises the debate of whether you go with carbon or stainless for your survival knife. Now a carbon steel blade will typically provide more toughness and strength, especially on the budget end of the spectrum, but it will of course require a little bit more care in your upkeep. The SRK does come with a powder coating on the blade to help keep rust at bay though. Now, although you can get the SRK with upgraded blade steel, with the SK5 versions of this knife priced from $40 to $45 at this point in time, it's definitely the knife to beat if you're building a survival kit on a budget. Now the next knife I'm going to show you breaks some of my personal rules, but I feel like I need to talk about it for those out there who really want something like this. The least you can do is buy a good one. I'm talking about the hollow-handled survival knife, or the stereotypical Rambo knife that a lot of people think of when they hear the term survival knife. And if you're gonna get one, I'd go with the Schrade SCH-F1, and the reason is strength. Now most knives of this style feature a blade and handle that are somehow welded or attached together, but this Schrade is milled out from a single piece of steel, 1070 carbon steel, with a 7.5-inch blade, which eliminates that weak point there right at the base. This was a build style that was definitely brought to prominence by Chris Reeve knives, but they don't make their version anymore, so at least we still have the more budget Schrade option now that you can still get, priced at just under $70 right now. With the strength provided by this type of construction, and the same is true for well-built knives with a full tang also, you've got the durability you're going to need for heavier tasks like batoning the knife in order to split wood for an emergency fire. This is not something that most of you are going to want to do every day, but in a survival situation, if this is the only tool you've got left, you want it to be able to stand up to this kind of abuse. For that same reason, I would avoid knives with a saw back on the spine, which thankfully this knife doesn't have. Now they do look cool, but often they're only of limited utility, and they often get in the way of batoning as well. Now some of these knives will have a compass here on the unscrewable butt cap. This one doesn't. Instead, it's got a nice solid piece here which unscrews. It comes equipped with a screwdriver set with a few different bits, but you can easily pull this out if you want to make room for things like fire starters or a fishing kit, etc. But keep in mind, if you are storing things like that in there, if you lose your knife, you lose those items too. Now the handle itself, because it's this round shape, it is a little more prone to twisting while you're working, but to mitigate that, they've knurled the surface to give it more traction. They've also beveled out two sections here as you come towards the base of the blade, which creates a good spot for pinching up and doing a pinch grip or other detail work. Now as for those personal rules I mentioned, I'm usually not a big fan of a guard on the back side of the blade, and this blade also has a hollow grind, and for a survival knife, I prefer the strength of a flat grind or a convex grind. I'm also not a fan of partial serrations myself either, as they're typically placed right where you'd want to be carving wood with a nice straight edge, but at least this type is a little bit more gentle in the way they're ground in and should be easier to resharpen when it comes time to do that. Now your mileage may vary, of course, and you may have different preferences for what you're looking for, but when it comes to a hollow-handled survival knife, the SCHF1 is my recommendation for a production version. Alright, so what about a budget stainless steel option? Coming in at about $70 right now, I really like the Gerber Strong Arm, made in the USA and featuring 420HC steel with a smooth ceramic coating. Now this is not a premium steel to be sure, but this knife has proven to be very tough in hard use. At 3/16 of an inch thick, we've got a 4.8 inch long drop point blade with a mid-height flat grind, which leaves plenty of steel at the full width for strength. We've also got a full tang design, but like the SRK, it does have a rubberized handle. It's good in a bunch of different grips too, thanks to its symmetrical profile. It's got a nice swell to fill the hand, and even a nice spot for a pinch grip thanks to this rigid nylon pad here that actually interlocks with the MOLLE compatible sheath. The guard is also there, and it's a little bit on the subtler side, but still effective, and even though you do get that rear guard, it is subtle enough to not get in the way too much. Now the Strong Arm has another thing from the quote-unquote survival knife bag of tricks, a protruding pommel that comes to a point there at the back. Now this is great for striking, or as I like to say, thumping on things in a survival situation. Whether you're pounding open nuts or flattening vegetation for cordage perhaps, or even for banging on with another stick if you need to drive the blade into something, being pointed like this, it brings all of your force down onto one point of contact, magnifying your strength. Now for a more premium stainless option, I direct you to the brand KnifeCenter. They make a high quality product in Japan, and everything from their classic F1 Pilot survival knife with a 4-inch blade up to their A1 with a blade over 6 inches would be a great choice for a survival knife. But for the one I've got here, I'm going to split the difference and show you their S1 with a roughly 5-inch blade, since all of these knives are all built in the same style. Now starting at about $165 for the base model of the S1, that comes with a VG10 blade, which is a phenomenal knife and a good value. But I've actually got the S1 Pro here, and that comes with a bunch of upgrades, admittedly at a cost. This one's about $290 right now. It does come with some extras though, such as KnifeCenter's excellent DC4 sharpener and a waterproof case to keep things interesting. We've got a full tang, and this is another knife with an overmolded rubber handle. We also get a protruding tang at the end, flat this time for all your thumping, and the Pro version features a metal finger guard. The blade itself is a drop point profile, and it features a convex grind. Now this has a cross section something like an apple seed, and it's probably the strongest grind for your survival knife, and it's very useful too. Now it can survive some heavy use like light chopping, but because of the geometry of the convex profile, you can even get another use out of it too. You can use the shoulder of the grind itself to very precisely angle the edge into what you're cutting for some very accurate cuts. Now the steel on this Pro version is laminated COS or cobalt steel, which is tougher than VG10, and it's got more wear resistance as well. No matter which design you choose though, these knives are field proven and very capable, and you really can't go wrong with any of them. Now as for step-up options in the carbon steel arena, there's two brands that should be at the top of your list: SE Knives and Becker Knife and Tool, made by Ka-Bar. Now any of their full-size models are a good choice really, but the two I'm going to focus on today are the SE6 and the Becker BK7 Combat Utility. We're definitely getting into big knife territory here, and these are about as large as I'd like to recommend, because any bigger and they get to be a bit more cumbersome on your belt. Now the Becker starts a little bit cheaper than the SE right now, coming in at about $108. I've got one here from my personal collection, and as you can see, it's certainly seen a bit of use and it's come through just fine. The blade is about 7¼ inches long, made from 1095 CV carbon steel with a powder coating. It's 3/16 of an inch thick, and you've got plenty of length and strength for batoning or light chopping, with a high flat grind to keep it a good slicer at the same time. Now that CV technically makes this a different steel from standard 1095, but in your actual usage, it's going to perform virtually the same. We've got a flattened protruding tang with the BK7 and an excellent grip. The handles themselves are synthetic and they're bolted onto the tang. They're technically removable and you've got space inside for some compact survival goodies, but you're better off storing them in the sheath that comes with this, which has a nice pocket on the front of it. The handles have a generous swell and they're contoured for both comfort and keeping your hand in place. If you do want a little more traction though, or you just want to upgrade the feel, there's also official micarta scales which can be purchased. In addition to comfort, the beak at the back of this knife even allows for good choking back for a little bit of extra leverage because it still gives you a nice big grip. The BK7 in my mind really is the essence of big survival knife personified, and it's always going to be a good and reliable choice. Now giving the Becker a run for its money is the SE6. The blade's a little bit shorter, about 6.5 inches, but it's also got a full-sized finger choil which lets you choke up behind the edge for better control during delicate tasks. And the steel follows the same essential formula. 1095 carbon steel with a coating, 3/16 of an inch thick, with a protruding tang at the back as well. It does deviate a little bit, however, and we see a drop point profile with a full flat grind. It's still plenty strong, and that profile is going to provide excellent slicing performance. Now, long known for having bolt-on flat micarta scales, SE have recently introduced versions with contoured micarta and G10 options, and they're only a nominal price upgrade too. The base model of the SE6 starts at about $135, and the contoured model I have here is only $9 more. It fits the hand extremely well, and the upgrade is well worth it in my mind. Now really no knife of this size is ever going to be a chopper per se, but the Becker is going to have a bit of an advantage there, because it's got a little bit of extra length, and because the handles on the SE, when you choke back on them, they're definitely good, but they don't offer as much retention as the Becker handle. Both of these knives are great though. They're made in the USA with great customer support behind them. Now on paper, the SE's warranty may look a little bit better, a lifetime no questions asked warranty, but K-Bar's warranty on the Beckers is also very good. I've never heard of them refusing to replace a blade if it has suffered a failure. Suffice it to say, again, you can't go wrong with either of them, and both of these knives are going to be an investment that should last you a lifetime. Now I've talked a bit about my personal preferences throughout this video because I've actually spent a fair amount of time thinking about this subject. While I stand by recommending any of these knives, there's actually nothing out there that has absolutely everything I want in my survival knife, so I had to design my own. This is the Nordsmith Pilgrim LT, my right-sized survival knife design, which has everything I want in one compact package. Now I call it the right-sized survival knife because I want it to be as easy to carry as possible, hence a blade length just under 4 inches. Now that size is about the bare minimum in my book for a primary belt knife. It's a great size to control very easily, and don't consider this to be legal advice, but it's also a size that won't raise as many eyebrows in most places. Steel is 1/8 inch thick AEB-L stainless. Now this type of steel is perfect for this type of application because you're going to get toughness that approaches a good carbon steel, and it's easy to resharpen when needed, along with the rust resistance and long-lasting edge of a good stainless. It features a versatile drop point blade with a flat grind, good for everything from wood carving to hunting to food prep, and a micarta handle. I prefer this over a synthetic material because sometimes I can find those to be a little too grippy for my taste, and I've designed this with a slim enough handle for easy carry and a shape that fits a lot of hand sizes very well. It's got an effective finger guard that's small enough to not interfere with most grips, and in lieu of a protruding tang, the pommel comes to an apex. This kind of splits the difference a little bit. Now when you're thumping, you're still going to come into contact with steel first, allowing you to concentrate your force to one point, but it's going to be more comfortable when you need to do anything like drilling when your hand is placed over the pommel. Now, coming in at about $245, this option is a bit more premium because it's handmade right here in the USA. I actually partner with LT Wright Knives to handle the production for me, so if you're familiar with the quality of his products, you know exactly what you're getting with a Nordsmith knife. Alright, so what about folding knives? Now, as I mentioned, you're going to be giving up some strength, but you do gain a lot of convenience. So I've got two here that are going to make a good option if you just had to have a folder. We're going to start again with Cold Steel and their AD10, which is backed up with their Triad lock, which is one of the strongest on the market, and this knife comes in at just over $190. This is actually just one of the great choices from Cold Steel. Their Ultimate Hunter folder and SR1 folder also deserve a look, but the AD10 is probably the most cohesive design of the three. The blade is 3.5 inches long. Now obviously you're not going to get the same kind of length you would get with a fixed blade, but it's made from S35 VN steel with a broad drop point blade. It offers decent toughness and a whole lot of edge retention. The handles are G10 and they're contoured very nicely, and that goes a long way to closing the comfort gap with a fixed blade. Most folders are more prone to hot spots, but this one does do a very good job of keeping them at a minimum, especially if you run the knife without the pocket clip. The AD10 even has a protruding metal pommel at the back, which is part of the back spacer, and a nice finger guard. Small finger choil too for choking up. So this knife still fits a lot of the must-haves for a good survival knife. One more lock type that'll make a good backbone for a survival folder is Benchmade's Axis lock. My favorite one that they make that fits the survival knife purpose in my mind is the 560 Freak. Now base models come with S30V steel and synthetic handles, and they start at less than $125, which, while not a bargain basement thing, are certainly attainable. But my favorite version of this knife is the Super Freak. Now that's not its official name, it's been lovingly dubbed that by the Benchmade fans because we've gotten a number of great upgrades. It features a CPM M4 blade, and again we get a versatile drop point with a high flat grind. This steel offers really good edge retention and even better toughness for rough handling. This steel is even tough enough for big chopping fixed blades, so while it may seem like overkill on a folder this size, I bet you're not going to think that if you're stuck out in the wilderness and need to rely on it. It isn't stainless though, which is why we get a black coating to help keep the rust at bay. The handles feature a modest finger guard, and they're large enough for a full solid grip, but you don't get any protruding pommel in this case. The materials are black and gray G10, which are milled for a nice comfortable grip. And for visual interest, you get some integrated red liners and red barrel spacers holding the sides together. Thanks to that open back style of construction, this knife is going to be easier to keep clean too, especially useful when the going gets tough. At the heart of this knife though, the backbone is that great Axis lock. Now just like the Triad lock on the cold steel, the key reason that this is going to be great in a survival situation is that these are ambidextrous. You may not think that's a big deal because you might be right-handed or left-handed and you think you'll only use that hand, but in an emergency situation, if for some reason you're unable to use your primary hand, you'll still be able to operate both of these knives with your offhand when you need to. So that's it for our list of the best survival knives you can get right now in 2020. Be sure to let us know in the comments what your favorite survival knife is, if it's one of these or if you've got something else that you rely on. Or maybe there's some other features or guidelines that you look for in your survival knife. In the meantime, if you want to get your hands on any of these great knives, you can click the links in the description and head over to KnifeCenter.com. And make sure you sign up for our Knife Rewards program, because you might as well earn some free money towards your next knife if you're gonna buy a knife anyway. I'm David C. Anderson from the Knife Center, signing off. See you next time.
Togetherness.
Sounded good while I was sitting at home in my pajamas. Tasty. I stumbled through that, but I think it came across well enough.
We'll see.
We'll see. Do you want me to do it again?